Hello and welcome to the Project Learn microlearning focused on high-yield learning activities. As we get started, I want to invite you to reflect on the activities and experiences in your club that invite young people to fall in love with learning. Maybe you can think of a science experiment where you saw light bulbs and my eyes lighting up. Maybe you can think about a poetry day where you saw young people expressing themselves and really pouring their hearts into writing poems. Maybe you can think of some contests that you ran where young people were learning, but they were also deeply engaged in whatever the contest or competition was. So they wanted more time and they were asking questions and working together. Think about those moments in your club where you could say, absolutely, this is a moment where young people are falling in love with learning. Whatever experience or activity you're thinking of, it was probably a high-yield learning activity. So this session is focused on high-yield learning activities. And I just want to remind you that the goal for education programs and for education in the club is that young people would be effective, engaged, adaptive learners who are on track to graduate with a plan for the future. And there's really an opportunity in high-yield learning activities to reach this goal in a number of ways. By helping young people build skills, by helping young people connect emotionally to what they're learning, to talk about their feelings, to talk about other people's feelings, to apply something they've learned to a brand new problem that they've never had to solve before or a brand new context, and to connect what they're doing to future opportunities related to college and career and life beyond the club walls. High-yield learning activities are fun with a purpose. They're playful learning opportunities. Both the playful opportunities and the deep learning, meaningful opportunities where youth are so focused that sort of time slows down and they just want to keep building what they're building or designing what they're designing. Teachable moments that you may not have planned, but when they arise, you realize that it's an opportunity to do some learning. That's often an opportunity for social and emotional skill building. If there's a conflict or if there's some other problem that you didn't anticipate that presents a teachable moment, these are all high-yield learning activities. And so the two keys to a high-yield learning activity are borrowed from the active learning training. If you have not taken the active learning training, I highly recommend it. It's available to all clubs through Spillett Leadership University, and it focuses on these two ideas of great content and adult support. Great content means that you're choosing the right learning activities for the youth you serve. They're the right level of challenge, they're the right developmental appropriateness, they're the right topic that aligns with youth strengths and needs and interests. And then adult support. So facilitating those activities in a way that's very engaging and supports active learning. So there are lots of sources of great content. One easy way to find the great content that's available to club youth is through the Youth Development Resource Catalog. This catalog outlines all of our programs and activities and capacity building resources. And for each of the programs and activities, it gives details about the targeted age group, the length of the session, the age group that it's designed for, and the specific academic and social and emotional skills that young people build in that activity. So that's a great way to choose the programs and activities that would be a good fit for your youth. And then all of these programs and activities are available to you. The collection of club programs is very varied. You've got some great STEM content like DIY STEM and Ultimate Journey, which is environmental science, some great college and career readiness programming like diplomas to degrees, money matters, and career launch, Summer Brain Gain is really project-based learning, and it covers a wide variety of themes, but always culminates in a meaningful project. And then there's lots of great learning opportunities in the programs in the arts, like the Arts Activity Guide, in leadership, in health and wellness with things like Smart Girls and Passport to Manhood. So tons of great content that you can choose from. Another source of great content is My Future. So myfuture.net is a platform full of high-yield learning activities for club, youth, and for youth everywhere. Some of these activities youth might be able to participate in on their own, but there's always an option to facilitate, as a staff member, to facilitate these activities as a group. So I want to make sure everyone knows that the My Future activities are not just digital learning experiences. They're not just for the computer lab, but it's really activities that you can implement in the club for a variety of settings. One nice thing about My Future as a source of high-yield learning activities is that you can easily sort by programs or by topic, so you can find the types of activities that you think young people would be most interested in. Finally, you can create your own great content. You can write high-yield learning activities that are specifically designed for the youth you serve using the elements of a high-quality session. This is a tool that you can find in the Program Basics Blueprint, and it just walks you through the elements of a high-quality session, including a warm welcome, a community builder where you give young people a chance to check in and maybe share how they're feeling, or maybe answer a question that's relevant to the activity you're about to do, or maybe play a warm-up game that sort of gets everyone in a new comfort zone. Group agreements to establish expectations for how everyone's going to engage. There's always a main activity and then a chance to reflect, to recognize young people, and to close. So if you're writing your own high-yield learning activities and you're thinking through, you know, maybe we'll do this arts project, or maybe we'll play this game, consider how you can build in those elements of a high-quality session as well. Oftentimes, reflection can be the difference between a high-yield learning activity and something that was just an activity that young people won't necessarily remember or remember what they learned. So that was all in the great content category. So choosing great content is one of the keys to high-yield learning activities. The second key is adult support, and that's all about you and how you facilitate whichever activity you choose. And so what you'll see here is a checklist of staff practices that are based in research and best practices for facilitating learning. I want to give you a moment to read through these on your own and consider whether there are any that you already do well and any that you could focus on in the future. Just to give a little bit more context for some of these, engineering for success and allowing for mistakes is a good way to ensure that you've set up an activity with the right level of challenge and support. So engineering for success means that you're setting young people up to succeed, that they should be able to eventually succeed at whatever the activity is. They have the right support, and you're available to give more support as needed. At the same time, you want to allow for mistakes, because if everyone can successfully complete an activity the first time, it may have been too easy. So you want to make sure that there's enough challenge, there's enough potential for some mistakes that young people can learn from that and grow and stretch. The second practice here about attending to learner diversity is really important because young people learn differently, and adults learn differently. We're not all the same. And so the skill here is differentiation, that instead of teaching one concept one way and you either understand it or you don't, you find ways to sort of help young people learn differently and support those differences. This practice calls out multiple options for three things: for engagement, representation, and expression. And here's what that means. Multiple options for engagement means that you give youth some choices about how they might participate. So you could say, for this activity, we're going to need a couple of people to volunteer to act out a scene from this book. So if you want to act out a scene from this book, come on stage, you can read a part. If you want to be a member of the audience, you can listen, and you can be listening for these things that we'll ask you to share later. If you want to be the director and help the young people who are acting out the scene, you can be in that supporting role. So whatever the case may be, giving young people options for how they're going to engage or how they're going to participate is a best practice for supporting diversity and inclusion. Multiple options for representation has to do with how you represent new information or how you introduce new concepts. Giving multiple options for representation means that you might both have a visual that young people could look at, and you might give an oral explanation so that they could either look at something and understand it, or hear you say it and understand it, or maybe there's a hands-on component where they could do something physically that would help them understand new information. So giving young people options for how new information is represented. And then finally, expression has to do with giving young people options for how they express themselves or how they communicate what they've learned. So a good idea here is that if you're facilitating an activity and you're always asking young people to raise their hand and say the answer, that's one option for expression. But it might help to also have some times where you ask a question and you say, turn to a partner and tell that person what you think the answer is or what you're learning. Because some young people feel more comfortable talking just to one person instead of in front of a whole group. Other options for expression could be to write down what you're thinking, to draw a picture that expresses what you're thinking, to write a song, or to create a project or a video that shows what you're thinking. So it's great to give young people multiple options for how they express themselves. This third staff practice is a great one, and it also sort of takes the load off. So aim for co-inquiry as a guide on the side, not a sage on the stage. The idea here, co-inquiry means asking together. So you can ask questions alongside the youth you're supporting. This one comes as a relief if you're teaching a concept that you yourself are not an expert in. So you, for instance, could facilitate a great computer science activity without having a PhD in computer science or without having coded a website yourself, because you don't have to be the sage on the stage. You don't have to be an expert. You can just be a guide on the side who's asking questions alongside youth and figuring out how you can get to the answers together. Finally, a great practice for workforce readiness is to encourage youth to explore their interests and passions as they relate to potential careers. You can do this in high-yield learning activities by pointing out when you see young people do something really well. So for instance, if you said, wow, I saw that you helped your team work together, you set a goal for your team, and then you outlined some steps of how your team could accomplish the goal. And that's a really important skill to have if you want to work in business or if you want to manage a team. Or I saw the way that you built this Lego set. It's really creative and it's really interesting and it's really structurally sound, and that's what architects do. So an architect is someone who builds things. Those are some little examples of how you can connect what young people are doing to future careers. Two reflection questions for you related to great content and adult support. Take a moment either to write down or to talk with your colleagues about these questions. For great content, what types of high-yield learning activities will spark a love of learning for the youth in your club? And when it comes to adult support, which of the staff practices for facilitating learning will you focus on this month? Feel free to pause and take as much time as you need for those. And a closing charge to you, some things to try related to high yield learning activities. Ask the young people you serve what they're interested in, ask what they would like to be doing more of in the club, and then explore the Youth Development Resource Catalog to see if you can find some programs or high yield learning activities that relate to the interests that young people have. Identify those programs and activities that you think your young people will enjoy and learn from, and then enjoy implementing those so that you can offer great high yield learning activities in your club.